So today we're going to talk about how not to waste time as a game developer because let's be real, it takes a very long time to actually make video games and there's a bunch of things that we have to pay attention to. But one of the killer things that kills us are the distractions and obstacles that we are really not paying too much attention to. So I'm going to ask you guys to lock in and I'm going to teach you all the hard lessons that I learned on what you should avoid in order to make as much progress as possible. Real quick, I have a couple of important announcements that I'll be making in the newsletter down below. So go ahead and check out the description whenever you have a chance. Being said, let's go ahead and talk about the number one thing. You need to have direction, more specifically an endpoint. If you're going to build a game, ideally you want to build to something, right? So in order to launch the game, you probably want to learn what your end product looks like so that you can build systems and mechanics and animations and all of these things for the game that you're making. If you're taking the approach where it's like, well, let me just iterate and add features and components and see what it looks like at the end, sure, that's not a wrong way to make a game. If anything, there's no like real way to make a game, right? You can always experiment and iterate and do all the things that you want. The problem is that when you continue to just aimlessly add all of these features, your game's scope starts to expand like crazy, and then it takes so much time to clean everything and make it more cohesive for the players that have a proper experience with your game. And so this is actually the fundamentals of like what causes overscoping. If you know what the end of your game looks like, if you know all the bosses that you're going to have, all the characters, all the weapons, all the systems required to have that game loop working, then what happens is you want to build around that. If you keep adding these little like sub features that on paper, oh, that sounds cool, that sounds like it's going to make the game better, what happens is if it starts disrespecting that endpoint, you are going to get a bigger scope. And this is what causes a multiplication of time within your development cycle. So you really have to narrow down exactly what you want. And again, your game doesn't have to be small. Small scope or big scope, like the size of the scope doesn't really matter. It's more about, are you able to manage it so that you can like work through it in a good flow, right? Because you could make a big game if you really want to. There's no one stopping you from doing that. The problem is when you have a big game and then you just keep adding and adding and adding and adding, and suddenly all of these factors are exponentially scaling to the point where it takes forever to make the game. So you really want to make sure you know what the end of your game looks like. What are the systems that you need? You probably want to write down a list, honestly, about like all the things that you imagine you'll need, and then just start working on that. The other thing is when you're building your game, specifically the prototype, you don't want to pick items that have endless iteration. Meaning, I like to advertise saying, hey, make your prototype ugly in the sense that use a placeholder, or you just work on the systems that make your game like mechanically work, so that once you have an entire working game, all you have to do is take the time to go back, replace the placeholders, and then from there you can focus on the art. The problem is if you have like a bunch of characters and then like a lot of art at the beginning, and then you realize over time, oh, I made 20 characters and they all have like this jump animation, for example. And then I realized, I think my game's not going to have jumping because we're going to use like this flying mechanic instead. Well, you just spent a lot of time animating jumps when in reality you don't need that, right? So the concept that I'm trying to, say here is like, don't write or don't like polish things or don't like iterate things that are not going to make it at the end of the game, and you won't know that until you have the mechanical parts of your game done. So I always say make your prototype ugly as possible. Just like put things, make sure that it works, program it, get the feedback, and then when you have everything set, you can go ahead and start polishing the art and making your game look beautiful, right? The other thing that I used to suffer a lot on is when you have a hyperfixation on details, right? This is important because part of the polishing process is literally just like going into these little intricate details and, letting the player explore your world and all these little cool things, right? The problem resides when you start working on these details as early as the prototype. What I'm showing you in the screen right now is this is a prototype of one of my games. And as you can see, there's like too many elements on the screen, a lot of text, a lot of flavor text in particular. And what I was trying to demonstrate is like, oh, this character has an ability, bonuses, and weapons. But then I also went a step extra by saying, oh, here's flavor text, here's lore, here's some extra things. And like on paper, cool, this would be good if I were polishing the game. But keep in mind, at this point of the project, I didn't iterate or get player feedback at this point. Meaning, I don't know if players were going to like it, if this was a good idea. So I'm spending too much time on something that just didn't get validated, and as a result I'm just spending way too much time writing the lore and writing all these like little details on things that don't matter. Because guess what, there's a high probability I just cut this and say, oh, like players don't need to know the flavor text. Oh, what if the bonuses can be represented numerically instead of like writing it out? So And think about like sound effects or colors or just tweaking animations. Like these things are valid and they are important in the polish phase, but you can't do it early. And more importantly, you can't just like hyperfixate on these details and just like keep on looking at it over and over and over and over again. Like you actually have to make progress. You can't just keep looking at something and tweaking it over and over. You might feel like you're making progress, but at the end of the day, if you're not actually progressing within, launching the game, you're not making progress. So just be very careful with that. And that this is a big vice that a lot of developers, I include myself, because I used to go through this all the time. And the best way to beat it is just recognizing, okay, am I spending too much time on this little detail? Yeah, let me go ahead and come back to it in the polish phase. So always divide your work by phases. The prototype, as in make sure it mechanically works. Beta is when you start adding all the content, and then polishing is when you start going back and fixing the details that we're discussing. Going back to the example of like, hey, what happens when you put too much artwork before you start making your actual game and everything? This is really bad. There's a couple of times where I caught myself doing this, but I'm just gonna share this to let you guys know, hey, don't make the same mistake that I did, right? But the character all the way on the left is a concept character that I had, and I was gonna animate this character doing all these attack animations and jumps and all these cool things, right? But before I did more art, I was writing the systems. I was making sure that, hey, can I make a game that feels good, responds well, has like good controllers and such. And once I recognized that I had the game mechanically working, then I said, okay, do I want to actually sit down and draw this entire character, make all these sprites and everything, only to find out that it's not the design that I'm going to go for? Probably not. So later, once the game was working and I had everything working, I was able to make a design that reflected what the character's design is supposed to do. So in this case, you can see here, it's like a new updated design. You have like these head boxes, like of the character whenever they talk. There's like a narrative system. The idea is like if I were to do an entire set of sprites for the first character design, I would be cooked because then I have to redo it when I decided to change the design. So you kind of want to stick to your initial design as early as possible. At the same time, I understand, hey, you might want to iterate. You still might not know what is your final character design for particular items. But like I said, art should be like one of the last things you worry about, because once the game works, then oh, my character doesn't have a jump button. Oh, my character only does melee stuff. And then you would design the art based off of what the game is allowing you to do. So do that. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time, waste a lot of resources, and realize, wow, I could have saved months worth of work had I waited a little bit more. The other thing, there's going to be moments where you're going to have a lot of dependencies. You're going to have a lot of programming problems. You're going to have like a lot of things that you need to do that are going to be boring, right? Game dev at the end of the day, it's typically like a job. At first, it sounds exciting because you get to bring your ideas to life. It's a work of fiction that players get to control, and that's amazing on its own. But at the end of the day, it's really just programming systems and just making sure that these puppets move the way that they have to. And so that means you have to sit down and deal with the boring work. And sometimes we will be bored to the point where we're like, you know what? This is I just want to do something different, right? Let me go back to animating the characters. Let me go back to making music, right? Let me go back to doing something more fun. And the crazy part is you'll go back to doing whatever you want to do. It'll feel fulfilling because it feels like you're making progress, but end of the day, you didn't get rid of the dependency that's actually blocking you from making progress. How do you beat that? Well, it might be boring and you just have to deal with that. And like not everything has to be boring. Like you can find enjoyment in these processes, and I hope you do, honestly. But I have to describe it this way because there are those moments where I was like, do I really want to program this line of code for like the 100th time to make sure it works and this and that? And honestly, that's what I had to do, So I'm just telling you, there's going to be those moments, and it's totally fine. Another problem that wastes a lot of time, unironically, is when you jump from one task to another, right? And what's tricky about game development is that there's so many things that we have to do, especially as indie developers, right? You got to do the program, the artwork, the dialogue, the sound effects, the controls, the systems, the settings, the resolution, the preferences, the saves. So many things going on, right? And the problem with this is that, you would say, oh, well, I have to tackle all of it. And I agree. However, you have to tackle it systematically. The reason why I keep talking about, do your programming first, as in do your framework first. Framework is just a fancy word to say, make sure that all of the systems, programming, mechanics, all of that works so that you can support whatever placeholder you have, and then replace the placeholder with the art that you actually want, with the design of the characters that you actually want to use. And then ideally, the whole point is you want to make sure that your characters, your art, your whatever you're visually looking at has the ability to flex on what the game offers you. So if my game, for example, if my game is a skateboarding game, right, you want to have some cool characters jumping and doing all these cool things with the skateboard. But your first step should be making a block that moves left and right and up and down. Okay, now make the block look a little bit like a board. Okay, can the board do the flips that we need to do? Can it emulate the experience of actually skateboarding? Then you have the controls, then you evaluate everything else, and if it's working, then you can say, okay, now let's take the steps to make this look visually beautiful. Okay, so I'm gonna add cool levels, I'm gonna add ramps, I'm gonna add the characters, I'm gonna add the helmets, I'm gonna add the stickers that you add, and then you move on. Now, what if I told you, let's make the movement system first, and then let's add like a really cool character. Okay, now we're gonna move on music. Like, these things need to be approached systematically. You can't just randomly jump left and right. And so, in the context of game development, yeah, you want to make sure that you're systematically approaching the tasks, but also outside of game development, you don't want to program and then get a notification on your phone and say, oh, I got to take this right now, this and that. And then you get distracted and you open social media, then you do other things. We can't afford that. We have to focus on one thing at a time, no matter what. All right. The next thing, mindless acceptance. This is when you can't say no to things that don't matter. Meaning, you say yes to favors, to extra work, to being invited out to, hanging out with your friends. Maybe something pops up and you're like, I can do it. I'm not opposed to doing this. And again, everyone has their own personal preferences, and you do what you want with your life. I'm not telling you have to say no to every single thing, right? At the same time, recognize that the more time you spend not making your game is just time that you're not making your game. It's really simple, right? So let's say your friend says, hey, we have a road trip coming up. You want to join? You could. Sounds fun, right? I mean, no harm, no foul. But that could have been an entire day where you could have produced a system, or you could have produced a new, level or boss. Now, again, this is completely up to you, right? Maybe you want to assess a life of balance. Totally fine. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm in my season of sacrifice, as they say, which means like I need to like really put my head down, and for these couple of next weeks or months, I gotta like make sure I make as much progress as possible. Therefore, I'm gonna say no to this particular invite because that time that I have is really important. Another, I guess, like a practical example that comes to mind is, hey, Saturdays, for example, tends to be like the most flexible day for developers, because typically if you have a job, it's from, Monday through Friday. Your weekend is just for you, and then Saturday is like probably the time you have the most amount of time. So, do you want to sacrifice that Saturday hanging out with friends? You could, but you could also make progress on your game. Again, your choice, right? Now, don't be offended when I say this, but I know a lot of developers. I also used to go through this, where I was like, I have this game idea. It's going to be a book. It's going to be a comic. Then it's going to be a movie. Then we're going to sell franchise and plushes. It's going to be insane. It's going to hold your horses, all right, one at a time. You can absolutely make a comic and a book and music and plushes. You can do absolutely everything that you want to do. That's not the issue. The issue is when your first idea is trying to spread out as much as possible without validation, without publishing. Like, literally work on one thing at a time. I'm telling you this because I wrote my book first, and then I said, okay, now I'm going to make the soundtrack for my games. And then I actually made the games. And then I'm working on the next project, etc. So it was never, let me write the book, and as I write the book, I'm going to jump to game dev, and as I jump to game dev, I'm going to, no. You can't spread out. You have to do one project at a time, and then in the project, do one task at a time. Everything's possible. I'm not denying that. I'm just telling you, please take it step by step. Otherwise, you spreading out is just going to completely waste so much time, because now you're just trying to manage. It becomes a game of resource management rather than actual progression at that point. So please take your time with that. All right. Now, another huge problem that I personally had was not playtesting early. The build that you're seeing right now on this little clip was something that I was working on privately for like 2, maybe 3 months before I even presented it to a friend. And then I was like, hey, can you like test this out? And he's like, yeah, sure. And we just found bug after bug after bug after bug, which, yeah, that's going to happen in playtest. But the problem is, like, these bugs were so fundamentally like wrong. Like, they really made me have to go back and like kind of fix the fundamentals of the game. And the problem with that is, like, this could have been easily detected had I play tested it early. Now, I didn't want to play test early because I was like, oh, my game doesn't even look good. They're going to think wrong about it. Sure. But also, did I have to animate 4 different character types? Did I have to make 3 different levels? Did I have to make a whole system just to find out that my game mechanically didn't work? This is why I'm saying, like, even if your game is ugly, please evaluate if it works early so that you can catch those bugs and other fundamental issues and continue building the game the way that you need to. All right? Okay. Controversial opinion. I do think that it is very difficult for a game developer to open their engine and enter a flow state, especially when there's a very small time constraint. let's say you have a very busy schedule, there's like a bunch of things going on, and you happen to have like these 10 minutes of free time that you're on your computer, you could program in something, right? Now, this is a skill that you have to practice, but I do think that in those 10 minutes, yeah, you could program something, right? Now the programming part becomes heavy because you need to be in a specific flow state to actually like code, right? There are other tasks you can do that could be related to art or things that have less resistance of like actually trying to dig deeper in. The whole point that I'm trying to say is if you have 10 minutes of free time during your day where you can do something productive, then you should probably be productive. Now, maybe you want to take a break, maybe you want to deal with it later. That's not completely up to you. You know, I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do. But there are always going to be opportunities for you to build things whenever you have these little like sprints of free time. It could be half an hour, it could be 40 minutes, it could be a 25 minutes. Maybe your friend is going to pick you up somewhere and as they're driving, you have 20 minutes and you're like, "Oh, well, that's I'm ready dressed, I'm ready showered. Let me just quickly put something on Unity, for example, right?" So just be aware of all the opportunities that you have because that's going to allow you to maximize your time going forward. And when you kind of like add them all up, you'll realize, oh, had I taken all of these like extra little breaks and like compiled it, I probably could have made more progress. Best example is let's say you work remotely and you have a lunch break of like half an hour, you eat really quickly, now you have like 20 minutes left. If you do 20 minutes of work every single day for, I don't know, a couple of months, you're going to make some type of progress one way or another, right? And then combine that or compound that with like your free time after work and all these things, you start making more progress. Okay. Now, I already talked about like, hey, you want to make sure that you stay in a boring state of mind so that you get rid of dependencies. But really, the main thing that I want to address here is that there are simply going to be those roadblocks where you're like, I really don't want to do this, but you just have to do it for the sake of your game. On the left, you'll see that this is like an early build of Dodge King Deluxe where things were working and everything, but there were a lot of systems that were just empty and missing, and visually it looks really simple compared to the right where hey, we had all our systems done, everything was set. It's now just focused on let's make content, let's make bosses, let's make you know the content as a whole. And so like these are the major differences you can make. Obviously, this is a visual showcase. It's easier if I were to show you like code and everything, but also for presentation purposes, I'm going to kind of ignore that. The long story short is there will be those moments where you really don't want to deal with the dependency, but that is going to be your biggest roadblock. So please focus on that no matter what. Really niche idea. I don't know if you are going to be more productive with or without music, but what I can tell you is if you're playing a soundtrack on your phone, right? Let's say it's a minute 30 seconds. When you finish playing that song, if you are mandated to pick up your phone and say, "Oh, that was a great 1 minute 30 seconds. Let me manually rewind so I can listen to the piece again," you're in trouble because you grabbing your phone, going back is the best way to get distracted. Because what if you got a notification? What if someone sent you a message? What if you have a phone call, right? Don't do that. Biggest recommendation, if you are listening to music while you work, play it in a looping fashion, right? So meaning like let the song loop over and over and over again so that you can just go on autopilot, keep working, and let the music do its own thing. Or let the music shuffle, meaning like once the soundtrack ends, it jumps to another one. And it does everything automatically so that you do not physically pick up your phone or open the browser, change the song. Just let the music flow the way that it has to. The moment you have to jump out of your focus and like press the button, you're cooked. All right. I've been cooked so many times doing this, and I realized, why is music a distraction? It probably is, but I personally think it's not. The problem stems when you make it distracting. So always listen to loopable or shuffled based music. Otherwise, you're gonna have to like break your own focus often, and you don't want to do that. Another thing is you don't need to listen to every single person. This is just basic criticism 101, where basically, yeah, there are going to be pieces of feedback that are important that you can definitely take and constructively use it for your benefit. But then there's also other types of feedback that doesn't necessarily contribute to your progression. So let's say, oh, that character was red, I wish it was purple. Could help, right? If it's like, hey, the contrast makes more sense, then yeah, that's definitely constructive, right? But if it's like player preference, whatever, right? But then also there's some comments where maybe it just has nothing to do with the project, the progress, and like not every single opinion out there actually works. So be careful who you listen to as well, because maybe you do get some really good constructive criticism, but it doesn't align with the endpoint of your game either. So you just have to be very critical and like, again, careful with it, right? But just be aware that not every single player, not every single person in your audience knows what's good for your game. So it's good to listen, but select what is actually necessary based on what actually gives you progress and enhances the player's experience. Now, another thing, and I think this is a very common thing, I used to live life without a schedule. That's bad. You should really consider putting a schedule. This helps you build habits and routines so that you enforce progression. The moment you have momentum, the moment you do something routinely, everything becomes easier and it gets done with less resistance. So if you know you wake up in the morning, you do an hour of game dev, you go to work, you come out of work, you work out, you cook dinner, whatever, and then you have like 3 more hours of more game dev before you like go to sleep. That's 4 solid hours that you have. And then if you know what tasks you have to do that day, then guess what? You're just naturally going to make progress. If you're in free flow mode where you're like, oh, I'll try it out today. I'll see how I feel. If I'm motivated, this and that, you're not going to make that much progress. More importantly, you're actually going to waste way more time than you think because you're not creating the habits that allow you to be more consistent with yourself. So consider writing the schedule, and more importantly, consider making habits that allow you to make your game, proactively. All right. Now, you've been watching this video for a while. Just click the little X button on the top right of your corner, just like this like clip here, and just open up your project, right, and just work. I know this video, right, and I hope this is helpful. But honestly, like you don't need to be on YouTube for 20+ minutes. And if you are, thank you for the ad revenue and everything. But honestly, like no, do it for do it for yourself, do it for your project. Like stop this video, close out, move on, do what you got to do. All right, like just start taking action. Now, before you click off, I do have a couple of more points left, right? But what I'm saying is like, please understand that the more content you consume, that's a lot of time that gets taken. So, and okay, little controversial opinion too, but like YouTube is a great place to learn. It's a great place for like information and everything. And I do enjoy watching videos. There's a lot of educational content out there that does give you insight. But please limit your time on there, because if you just endlessly consume YouTube or any form of media, you're in trouble. And I heard this one conversation the other day that I thought was really interesting, where a person basically says he doesn't go to Instagram, he doesn't go to YouTube, he doesn't go to social media. He strictly only uses anime in particular for his free time to consume content. So he'll do his work, he'll do everything, but he'll say, "Oh, an anime episode is 20 minutes long. It's consistent. It shows you something that gives you like progress and everything. And I'm only going to watch one episode a day." So now he has like this routine where he's making progress, he's doing everything that he has to do, but his time of content consumption is literally a consistent, cohesive 20-minute episode of the anime that he's watching. And then he cuts it off, goes to bed, does his stuff, wakes up the next morning, whatever, and then like continues, right? And I thought that was interesting because like I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, you're right. The problem with content consumption is it becomes endless if you let it be endless, right? But then if you restrain it in a format where it's like anime or an episode, well, Netflix episodes are typically like an hour long, right? But like if it's something that can be consumed in like particular times, you have more consistency over it and actually helps you save time in comparison to being endless. So just be careful with that, right? The other thing is I should have okay, my bad. This actually was supposed to be the first slide, but you could also watch videos in X2 speed, and that'll like help you get through the content faster. But also, it's kind of a trap because now you're like, oh well, since I'm in X2 speed, I can watch twice the amount of videos. Be careful, okay? So recap: build your tolerance, tolerate the boring, try to make habits to keep the snowball running, avoid distractions as much as possible, try to get rid of your dependencies. Please get rid of every single roadblock possible. Stop being distracted. Do one task at a time. Make as much progress as possible. Click off of this video. And if you guys have any other suggestions for any type of like production-based questions you have in game dev, specifically for indie devs, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to make content based off of that. So anyway, I hope this video helped. Stop watching this video. Make your game. Keep going. I have other videos on my channel if you guys want to learn other speedrunning tricks as well. But for now, just make sure that you can take the time back and make progress. All right.